how do you capture and keep track of ideas?
I don't have a very complicated system. I just have notes that when I have a certain thought I'll that I think I will want to refer back to, or that if there's a certain pointer that I want to follow up on, um, I'll just write it down. And I have these notes broken down by a few different topics. Um, so, for example, AI for creativity right now is something I'm excited about, and so I just have a note for that where if something comes up, I'll write it down there. A while ago, I used to have this Google Doc, especially in grad school and earlier in TTI, this huge Google Doc of any idea I had at any point in time that I would go back and revisit and resort based on what I'm most excited about, and things of that sort. But I don't do that. Actually, I do still have that Google Doc where I will go in and add those things. I take that back. So if there are project ideas that here's the thing that we could work on, that will go there. But if there's a thought that I just know I want to write it down, I don't know where I'll use it, then that's just in like a text file of notes.
How do you capture and keep track of ideas?
I have a little spreadsheet where when there's kind of an idea that I just need to write down, so I stop thinking about it and I'll write, like, excuse me, kind of, an abstract or a few sentences about what the idea is. I'll write down what is the related work and like what a first step would be if I can think of it, of like, okay, suppose I did want to do something here, what would the first step be to try to make it a bit more concrete? And then I also track if there is one, like what is the inspiration, just to kind of like keep the sense of like, this came up because I was talking to so-and-so and we were talking about X, but then that kind of started making me think about Y, and etc. And for bigger ideas, I think it just kind of takes care of itself. I spend a lot of time thinking about, like, what am I trying to do in the 5-year time frame, and what are the pieces of that, and what are the like sort of how does it all fit together? And so I guess I just kind of keep that in my head.
How do you capture and keep track of ideas?
How do I capture? What do you mean exactly?
Like, do you write them down in a particular notebook? Do you have an ideas document? Are you generally not a notes person, but do you see them visually laid out in some columns or some management software? Like, what do you do to make sure that you keep track of your ideas or thoughts that you've had?
Yeah, everything usually is in my mind, and yeah, I keep thinking about them, and sometimes I write them, but I don't have a specific, like, I don't have a notebook that I write ideas in, and so on. It's yeah, and unfortunately some idea I forget some ideas because I didn't write them, so that's the issue. But yeah, usually they're in my mind, and I think about them, and if they're good ideas, probably I spend a lot of time during the day thinking about them. So that's.
How do you capture and keep track of ideas? Like, are you a notes person, calendar? Do you use something else?
Yeah, all of them. I have redundancy in these things. I will take notes on paper, on sticky notes, in my iPad, on like a doc on my laptop, in my calendar. Yeah.
Oh, wow.
I don't know why. I just it's just whatever feels right at that moment. I will write it there.
Okay. And is there a source of truth? Like, is there one? No. And so
I also rarely look back at my notes.
Okay, yeah.
So it's more of like a consolidation of my thoughts type thing. And for some reason, sometimes I prefer to write it on paper, and sometimes I need to type it because we're moving too fast or something. And yeah.
Yeah, I know what you mean. I end up writing a lot, but very rarely do I go back to my notes. And the purpose is just to remember and like let it process.
Right. Sometimes I do. I will look back. But whether or not they're intelligible is a whole other story.
How do you capture and keep track of ideas?
I have a notebook. But yeah, I think, yeah, having a notebook, I also, I tend to also write things, sketching things out in code, like in pseudocode kind of a way to remember sort of, because sometimes a notebook is not enough. You want to sketch things out. Yeah. But I feel that most of my time is not occupied by new ideas, but it's more about how to make ideas work. That's a field that where most of the time goes.
How do you capture and keep track of ideas?
How do I capture and keep track of ideas? So I have this note in which I have a lot of ideas, which I have never gone back to. But yeah, if I get a random idea out of nowhere, I usually write it down in a Google Note. But other than that, I think either I start working on a project, try to incorporate this idea. So if it seems like it's relatable to any of the projects, I try to incorporate it into project, maybe write an overleaf document which kind of describes what I have in mind, and then try to, add it to a project. Otherwise, yeah, if it's completely out of the blue, then I just write it in my note.
And you don't go back to that note to ever look at it. No.
Like 10 things there, or more.
Maybe it's just serving as a device where you solidify your ideas during the process of writing. It's just.
Let's call it that. Yeah, thanks.
Sure. How do you capture and keep track of ideas?
Oh, that is a good question. I will sometimes, that is one of the things that I will occasionally write down, because I find I sometimes will have ideas out there and then I will lose them. And I will sometimes wander around thinking I had an idea about that and not remember what it was. And I find that deeply frustrating. So that is the one thing that I will tend to write down. I don't typically make lists, but quick little jot down of an idea that I have in the middle of the night or something like that. Yeah, that I will do.
How do you capture and keep track of ideas? Do you maintain lots of lists? Do you have certain other tools that are your favorite go-to?
Yeah, I mean, I guess, let's see. I definitely bookmark papers. I read them on my iPad. I generally use GitHub for everything. So I have a bunch of just repos where I keep notes. Yeah, I find GitHub to be a really nice tool. I use it to make my websites or projects or keep issues together. So I've really enjoyed that as a kind of academic tool.
And how do you capture and keep track of ideas?
I used to just write down Post-it notes and slap them on my wall. And then anytime somebody did it already, I'd take it down. Or if a student would come in and like ask for something, I would just turn and try to find something appropriate to hand them to start the conversation. I'm out in my office now.
That is beautiful. Like,
well, the problem is when I go back to my office after all this, I'm just gonna have to like take down all the sticky notes, right? Like there may be like one survivor by the time I get back.
And it's like you're scrolling through archive. Well, that one's done. That one's on. Gotta throw that one out. There's a physicality to this that is really nice.
Yeah, it's something somebody showed me during an interview process. They would sort of like, they'd have people on these cards and you'd rank them on a wall, and like the physicality of it made you not forget that you're not just considering like a pair, you're considering the whole space, and it ended up being nice for this too.